Hello, my wonderful pen friends. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Questions and Answered here on Currently Inked, the probably most misnamed show about fountain pens on YouTube, because I almost never show you any pens that are actually currently inked, and today's probably not going to be all that much different. I only have a couple pens inked, and I've talked about them already, so I've got one more to show you. Maybe I'll show you here, maybe I'll show you in the next one. We shall see. All right, questions. Questions. This first one comes from John and everyone else on the internet. John is in Boston, and this question is a question I get at least twice a week. That question is, what pens would you say come with a buttery smooth nib out of the box more often than not? Everyone's perception of buttery and smooth is different, and it's so dependent upon ink and paper that it's hard to say. I've suggested pens and people get them and they say, oh, this pen was awful. It was so scratchy, or it was so unpleasant, or it was squeaky, or it really depends. And so I will tell you what I believe the best nibs on the market are out of the box in terms of smoothness, but I do it with a huge disclaimer that it's going to be different for every single person because there are so many variables that go into smoothness of the nib. And I use medium nibs most of the time. If you order a fine, you may find that the fine is different. And there's variation from nib to nib because they were worked on different people or by the same people who, maybe someone was having an off day adjusting nibs, or maybe they wasn't worked on at all. And I just got really lucky because I only review a single pen. So patterns that I have seen, probably the smoothest out-of-the-box nibs I have used that have been consistently smooth out of the box come from the German manufacturer Diplomat. Diplomat uses nibs from the company Jowo, and then they adjust them in-house. And with one exception, which may or may not have shown up yet in some of my review videos, they've been very smooth out of the box, like very, very smooth. And I am not the only one who believes so. I know several other reviewers who have felt the same thing, especially their medium nibs. I find their medium nibs to be among the best I've ever used. Pelican has very smooth nibs out of the box, often too smooth. But I will say that I find that to be the case only on the M800 series. The M1000 series are smooth, but they're a mess, at least the ones that I have tried. And I've only tried a couple, but both of the ones I've tried have needed to be taken to a nibmeister to be fixed. They're just too soft. The nibs are too soft. The M800 is, for me, the sweet spot in the Pelican lineup in terms of size, in terms of nib functionality, in terms of nib rigidness and softness. It's a sweet spot. Their nibs are very smooth. They are very wide. They tend to be a little bit on the baby's bottom side. So be careful of that. There are other nibs out there that write really well. Platinum, Sailor, Pilot, Aurora, Franklin Christoph nibs usually work really well. Edison nibs usually work really well. I'm trying to think. I know there are other manufacturers out there, and for some reason I am just blanking on them. Mont Blanc nibs tend to write very, very well. But in terms of buttery smooth, Diplomat is the one I usually refer people to out of the box because they seem to take a lot of pride in putting together a very, very good nib. So that is my suggestion, hopefully thoroughly disclaimed, and then I'm going to cut a snippet of this snippet out and put it out as a separate video, which I'm going to put in the frequently asked questions because I don't ever want to answer it again. Thanks for the question, John. I'm not giving you a hard time, I promise. I'm just being snotty. All right. Leonard from Germany asks, can you recommend some permanent inks? I don't have to worry about having them in my pen. I would suggest you look at, probably what you're looking for are document inks. So Rohrer and Klingner makes a document ink, as does De Atramentis. Both of those you should be able to put in your pens without too much difficulty. Mont Blanc makes one as well. forget I think they call it permanent blue. That should be pretty safe. You want to stay away from iron gall. I personally stay away from noodlers, and I've talked about why. Go see the frequently asked questions if you haven't heard me talk about it before. But yeah, in terms of permanent inks, those are the ones I would recommend probably are the Rohrer and Klingner and the Diatramentus document inks. There's also here in the US, and I'm trying to find my bottle of it. I just saw it. Where did it go? Oh, up here. Haha. There is a company called Scribes. It's here in the US, and they make a waterproof document ink that is insanely waterproof. The ink is not well known. It has not been thoroughly tested or thoroughly reviewed. I've used this brown. It's worked really well for me. This is the ink that at the San Francisco show, the guy selling it put the ink in, he had someone sign their name, put the paper in a container of water and left it there for 72 hours. And 72 hours later, it was still as crisp and clean as the day it was put down on the paper. So if you want something insanely waterproof, this is a good one, the Scribes ink. In fact, it is so waterproof that when the bottle of green, which did not have a tight lid, leaked all over the inside of my suitcase, I still, to this day, have not been able to get it out of the lining of the suitcase. So it works. Yeah, that was a, oh, darn moment when I opened my suitcase at the hotel that night, except darn was not the word I used. I'll leave the rest to your imagination. All right, hopefully that helps. Next question comes from Henry in the UK. What is your advice for someone who has a scratchy pen? Do you try to make it wetter, smooth it, send it to a Nimmeister, or simply sell it and move along to buy a different pen? I am a firm believer in attempting to fix it yourself. And I've got a 3-part video series out there. It's called Adjusting Your Fountain Pen. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend you do so. It should give you some tips and tricks on how to try to fix it yourself. So I would say at least 80% of the problems you get with nibs out of the box are problems you can resolve yourself. Most of the time, the scratchiness is just out of aligned tines that are out of alignment. That's really easy to fix yourself. Fountain pens, one of the things that makes fountain pens and makes them so much fun to use is that they can be adjusted and customized. So if you're going to be serious about this, I firmly believe you should get yourself a few inexpensive pens, go buy yourself a 5-pack of Jinhao X450s, and start learning how to adjust and smooth nibs, because it is something you're going to want to know how to do. That of the remaining 20% that you can't fix yourself, 15 to 18% of those can be fixed by a Nimmeister. Every now and again, you'll run into a problem, and it's rarely scratchiness. It's almost always ink flow that just can't be fixed. And at that point, you either need to sell the pen or return it. But most of the time, you can fix your own problems. And yeah. Now, whether or not you should have to fix problems out of the box is a completely different question, and one that I have ranted about ad nauseum in the past. I don't believe you should have to. Now, I believe that a pen should write out of the box. If you get a pen and it does not write, that's a problem. If it doesn't write the way you like and it can be adjusted, that I'm totally okay with. So that's kind of where I stand on it. If I get a pen out of the box and it doesn't write, unless it's a pen I really like, I will do everything in my power to sell it back or to get it returned or exchanged or something like that, which is why I tend to only buy from retailers who have a really good return policy or will stand behind the products that they sell. So there you go. Hugh in London asks, what is your worst fountain pen experience? Speaking of pens that you just cannot get to work, my worst fountain pen experience was with a Monteverde, a series of Monteverde pens. It was the Prima, and you can go back and find my review of it, the Monteverde Prima series. I went through 3 of them. Not a one of them worked well. Serious ink starvation problems, nib problems. I swapped out feeds, I swapped out converters, I swapped out nibs. I could not get the pen to work, which was a shame because it was a very interesting pen. It was well made, well constructed. The exterior was. It's just the writing mechanism would not work. And fortunately, it wasn't the most expensive pen in the world. And it was a good learning experience. But that, I would say, that's probably been my worst pen experience. Aside from the time that I dropped someone else's fountain pen nib first on a hardwood floor. That was really the worst experience, but it wasn't because of the pen, it was because of me. Paul in Texas asks, of all my fountain pens, my Pilot Custom 823 is by far my best writing pen. Have you come across any pen models under $1,000 that write as well and as smoothly as this model? We get back to the whole smoothness question, which is always tricky. I would say that I consider the Aurora Optima and Aurora 88 to be on par with the Pilot Custom 823 in terms of a writing experience. I like them more in terms of design. They are both under $1,000. In the case of the Optima and the standard Optima and standard 88, significantly under $1,000. Other ones that write under $1,000 that write as well. You know, if you can get a Visconti that writes well, I find them to be really great writing experiences, but very different, very soft. Likewise with a Pelican. Pelican M800 in particular is I love that writing experience quite a bit. On those, I tend to go for a slightly finer nib because I find their nibs to be really wet and really wide. And so I like a fine on my Pelican M800, whereas I like a medium on the Pilot Custom 823 and a medium on the Aurora Optima or Aurora 88. Oh, I should also mention, I believe that you can get some Franklin Christoph or Edison pens, both of which will write very, very well. It will not be quite as special a writing experience as the 823 because of the feel of that nib. There really aren't a lot of other nibs quite like the 823 nib. Every nib is a little bit different, but both the writing experience on the Edison pens and the Franklin Christoph pens, especially if you get that very cool SIG grind that Franklin Christoph does on their pens on a gold nib, it's pretty primo. So I really like those quite a bit. Kind of along those lines comes our next question from Kenneth in Poughkeepsie, New York, who says, I am interested in purchasing an all-day writer. I write a lot. The Custom 823 intrigues me. I love changing ink colors, and the 823 filling mechanism and maintenance makes me nervous. Should I not be concerned, or do you have other recommendations not more expensive than the 823? If you're a serial ink changer, the 823 is going to be a problem for you. It is a pain to clean. It really, really is a pain to clean. I cannot recommend it for that particular usage. So, other pens that are not more expensive than the 823, that's a little tricky, simply because the 823 has a couple of things going for it. First of all, the nib experience is superb. It really, really is superb. It also has a very large ink capacity. And you're going to be hard-pressed to find another pen with that ink capacity and the same caliber of writing experience for under $288, in my opinion. I could recommend other pens like the Conid bulk filler would be another one that you could write with all day. It's much easier to clean. Again, Pelican, I know I keep bringing them up, but the Pelican M800, you can actually unscrew the nib unit and clean it out that way. So it's easier to clean than the Pilot Custom 823. Now, technically, you can take the 823 apart, but they tell you don't, and they don't provide you the tools to do it. I've taken mine apart and thus ruined the warranty on it, but it was already out of warranty anyway. So I would just say that might not be the right option. The other thing you could look at is maybe having a custom pen made, because for $250, you could have a custom pen made that you could eyedropper and fill with a ton of ink and write for ages and ages and ages and get it to fit what you like. So there's some custom makers out there. You could eyedropper some of the Franklin Christoph pens, and again, have them work on the nib for you, or the Edison pens. You know, Brian Gray of Edison has studied with the nibmeister Richard Binder and does a lot of work on the nibs, and especially if you get something custom made, you can have him work on the nib for you and get it to the way you like to write. So those are a few other options to consider. Robert in New Mexico asks, Matt, have you an opinion on Levenger inks? Several years ago, I bought a box of inks at an estate sale, and it contained several bottles of Levenger ink: Cocoa Brown, Fireball Orange, and 3 shades of blue. The brown is my favorite, although I am rather light in brown inks presently. I have not had any issues with these inks whatsoever, but it seems the fountain pen world has largely ignored them. So do you have an opinion, that is? I don't. I've never used them. I don't know who makes the inks for Levenger. Levenger, I believe, is kind of one of those, they get white label inks. So someone else makes the ink for them, I would assume. I don't know that for sure. That's just a guess on my part. And they sell them. I think the reason that Levenger inks don't get more attention is simply because the only place you can buy them is Levenger. They don't put their inks out through Goulet Pens or Van Ness or Anderson's or Pen Chalet or Gold Spot or any of those other places. They only sell them through their website. And fountain pen people don't buy a lot of Levenger pens. Levenger makes some nice pens. I've reviewed a few of them. I like them, but they have a relatively limited line. They're not super well. They don't have a huge presence in the online community. They seem to be very heavy in the mail order world, and they're not heavily involved in the fountain pen community. So I think those things kind of come together and say, people are like, look, I can go to Van Ness Pens or Anderson Pens and buy 1,100 different colors of ink. Why would I go to Levenger and buy one of 12 colors? I don't know how many they have, but one of 12 colors when I could go and buy something similar from this place that has a whole lot more to choose from. So that's, I think, why they don't have a larger presence and why I don't have an opinion of them, other than I wish they would make their inks available through other retail locations, because I think people would pay attention to them a little bit more. So I'm glad you like them. I haven't seen a lot of reviews of them out there, so if you get a chance, maybe write up a review and post it somewhere online. I think people would appreciate having that. So thanks a lot for the question. So this final question for this episode comes from Andrew in Guam, who says, now that you are streamlining your ink collection, how are you dealing with the plethora of new inks on the market? And I can very gleefully say I am not. I have not bought a new ink in a long, long time, and I find I don't care. I have become a little bit of what I feel like is a mildly interested outsider when it comes to the ink world. I watch people like Robert Oster just coming out with inks left and right. And, hey, here's some more glitter inks, and here's another teal that sheens highly. And, the fountain pen community is always going to be super excited about whatever's new and exciting. Or rather, maybe a better way of saying that is the fountain pen community is always going to be excited about what's new. And so I think ink manufacturers are having to come out with new inks really frequently just so they can stay top of mind. That's a little unfortunate in my book, because the inks we love get lost in the inks we have to have because they're new or they're special edition. Mont Blanc, I'm looking at you. So the way I've been dealing with all the new inks coming out is I have no idea what all the new inks coming out are. I really have no insight into it, and I find that is incredibly freeing. I've been able to go back and use the inks I love. In fact, I went through my collection. I still have a lot of ink. Let's not fool ourselves at all. But I went through my collection and pulled out everything that I wasn't in love with. I swatched that for my color rings, and I think I have my color ring down here. It might be in the other room. Swatched them for my color rings, and then I sold them. And what's left are the ones that I really like. And now it's easier for me to pick an ink to ink up my pens with. I don't feel like I need to pick a different ink just because I want to try it. Like, it's sitting on my shelf and I haven't used it yet. So I put it in my pen, even though I don't like it as much as another ink that I have used for years and really like. So I've found it particularly freeing to just say, hey, I know what I like. I've got inks I like. I've got every color family I could want on the shelves behind me. And I know how they perform, and I know their properties, and I like them. And so I just enjoy using what I've got. It's really nice. I like it. So that is how I have been dealing with it. I think at the end of season 5, I will probably go through my collection one more time and do another culling. I want to get it down to no more than between 50 and 70 inks. And that's still a lot of ink. But yeah, I think I could probably get rid of some of the colors in my collection here and still be just fine. So in any case, thanks for the question. Yeah, thanks for joining. Don't forget to head over to penhabit.com to see the show notes and links to all the stuff I talked about in this episode. You can also head over there to look in the shop for any pens I happen to put up for sale, or the Inky Fingers notebooks. The paper that the Inky Fingers notebooks have been printed on is, as I mentioned several times, out of production. So this round of notebooks may be the last in a long while until I find a paper I like better, or at least as much as what I've got. So if you want to try these notebooks with the wheat straw paper, you probably better order them sooner rather than later, because once they're gone, the wheat straw paper will not be making a comeback. Speaking of me putting a limited edition on something, or a special edition, this one is constrained entirely by supply. So there you go. All right. I think that's going to do it for me. I have been in this room for about 2.5 hours talking, answering questions. So my eyes are starting to cross and my mouth is getting a little mealy, and I need some coffee. So I'm going to go get myself some coffee and enjoy the rest of my weekend. So thank you for watching. Have a great one, and we will see you here soon on another episode of Currently Inked.